Hi, you're listening to the Paranormal Peep Show on the Paranormal UK Radio Network with myself, Neil Geddes-Ward, and Andy Chaplin. Andy, how are you?
I'll be honest, Neil, bored. How many weeks are we into this lockdown? Is it 9 weeks now?
The months are creeping by, and I don't even know what day of the week it is.
I'm exactly the same. Literally, sometimes I'll get up because, most people look forward to the weekends, don't they? It's kind of, Friday, Saturday, fantastic. But now every day is the same, so there's no differentiation between weekdays and weekends. So I get up and it could be a Monday, it could be a Sunday, it could be a Thursday. Who knows? Who cares? But
yeah.
The highlight of my day is quite sad. It's just going for a walk or going for a run. But after 9 or 10 weeks or so, it does get a little bit boring. So, the good news is that we're gradually easing out of lockdown. So I don't know if you've got any plans, Neil, after things begin.
Well, I was allowed out today to build a shed for my girlfriend. So I've been building a shed all day, which was extremely difficult because it's quite hot here in the UK at the moment. But I've got loads of things to keep me busy. I've got painting projects. I hate gardening, but I've been forced into it. I really hate it. What else am I doing? I'm painting paintings. I'm writing a book. Encounters with Fairies, Ghosts and Spirits. I'm at chapter 12. So yeah, that's based upon the talk I've been doing for the past sort of 10 years or so around the UK, which was actually just a talk basically to blag my way in to get a free stall at a conference so I can sell my artwork. But now it's picked up with interest and people are booking me now to do the talk, and I bring the artwork along as a secondary kind of thing to show people. So that's led to the book, which I'm currently at chapter 12. It's going well, but I'm finding myself really, really busy. So I'm not bored. I'm always kept busy with loads of different things. So I'm kind of enjoying it in some ways, but I understand there's a more serious side to it, the negative side to it, because obviously there's people out there that are getting this COVID-19. We've obviously done some shows on it where we've explored different conspiracy theories, and it seems to be that every day a new conspiracy theory arises, and we have to kind of take notice of it and take it on board. And you're thinking, is the government being honest about it, or are all governments being honest about it? Are they just blagging their way through something that they're in deep water about and they really don't know how to get out of?
I think it's so multi-layered, because I don't think it's just like one thing that's going on. It's almost like the David Icke point of view. He doesn't really see lots and lots of different conspiracies. He sees one big conspiracy with a lot of different strands. And I'm kind of like along the same line. So it's almost like we can tick off the conspiracy theories coming true. So let's have a look. Global pandemic. A lot of people be talking about that. Microchip population, that's on the cards. Mandatory vaccine, that's on the cards. One world currency, that's on the cards. One world government, that's on the cards. What have I missed out? Cashless society, they're talking about cash is bad. People handling cash might have the virus on it. Cashless society, so that's on the cards. So, tick by tick by tick. It's all being ticked off. And now we've got the riots going on and the looting going on. So we are looking at the army, the military going on the streets. I think Trump has actually been forced into that position by, I suspect, the dark cabal, satanic elite, whatever you want to call it. And so now we can tick off martial law as being another one. Social distancing. So this goes along the lines of I want to say kind of like the depopulation agenda, but not so much killing people, but rather stopping people from having sex. I don't know if you saw in the newspaper, Neil, this thing about it's now illegal, or it's going to be illegal to have sex with somebody who doesn't live in your house if you have it in someone else's house or in your house. Did you read that at all?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of ways I can hit on people with a 2-meter distance in a queue for B&Q or to get wallpaper or something.
But putting on the tinfoil hat, I really think this is to do with global or cutting the global population. Social distancing, so not wanting people to get intimate with each other. So dating is out the window, because of social distancing. Nobody wants to kind of be near anyone else, let alone kiss or touch hands or anything like that. So you got that. We've got the not allowed sex with somebody else inside your house. I just kind of think this is along the lines of let's keep the population down by introducing these all these things, and putting them under the banner of some virus pandemic, which is already fizzling out anyway. I've actually got a friend of mine who's got 3 people who he knows who work in a local hospital, Lister Hospital in Stevenage. He said in the beginning of March, there was about 100 COVID patients, which was quite a lot in that hospital in Lister. And he says that they say now there's about 5 patients. There's about 5 patients with COVID. So there's a reality of what's going on with COVID, and then there's a perception of reality.
Absolutely. Yeah, because I was in Poole Hospital in Dorset about a week ago with my girlfriend, and I asked the ultimate question. I said, so how many COVID patients do you have here? And the lady said, oh, we've only got 2. I went, bloody hell. No wonder you got time to make videos.
Well, this is it. This is it. I mean, my position is, of course, fully support the NHS, fully support doctors and nurses. There's no question about that. But you got to question the reality. Why is it that there's so many TikTok videos being made when we're told the wards are, absolutely inundated with COVID patients? Doctors and nurses are run off their feet, is what we're told, exhausted, 14-hour shift of coping with COVID patients. And then we find out the reality that actually the hospitals are kind of a bit empty. And it's interesting what you say, Neil, because I'm hearing this from different people. And this is people that have either been in A&E or escorted friends or family into A&E, and they're saying they're empty. There's no one there. There's no patient there.
Yeah, so, it's petering out. Now, you mentioned an interesting phrase there, tinfoil hat. Now, that's one that's always associated with people like us. But that brings me nicely to one of our guests, and that's Zelia Edgar from the Paranormal UK Radio Network, who presents her own show called Just Not Another Tinfoil Hat. Have I got that right, Zelia?
Yep, Just Another Tinfoil Hat.
Just Another Tinfoil Hat. Thank you for joining us. And also we have Steve Ward, also on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. Steve, are you there?
I'm here. Great to be here.
Great. And Steve, what's the name of your show again?
The High Strangeness Factor.
Right. Okay. That's brilliant. So whereabouts are both you guys in the States, just so we can kind of imagine in our map head, if you like, roughly where to think you could both be?
Well, I'm located in the fantastically weird state of Wisconsin.
Okay.
And I'm just a stone's throw away in the state that looks like a mitten called Michigan. We're only probably about 4 hours from each other, roughly. Okay. Although you have to go around Chicago, and that's a crapshoot. You don't know, how long it's going to actually take because of traffic. Right.
Why did you have to go around Chicago? Is there just mountains in the way or something? Or
it's just crazy traffic jams. Even though you're not going directly through Chicago, all the freeways and highways that surround it can really be jammed sometimes. Even if you're just going sort of under Chicago, going west into Iowa or Illinois and Iowa, you can lose a couple hours.
I'm just looking at your state border at Michigan because you said it looked like a mitten, so I had to Google that.
Yeah, the lower peninsula is like a mitten. We've got 2 peninsulas. We can boast we've got 2 peninsulas. So we took the upper peninsula from Wisconsin. So I know. Yeah. I hope Zelia doesn't hold that against us.
It almost looks
hard
like
feelings.
It almost looks like a dog as well, possibly, because there's a mouth and there's a little pointy ear, little round nose. It's a dog chasing. What is it chasing? Chasing something. Maybe a bird. Actually, maybe it's a dog chasing a bird, but maybe that's my mind.
Well, I think what do they call that thing where you see things and your mind makes it up?
Pareidolia.
Yeah, pareidolia.
Yeah. A lot of people see it with clouds. I never realized you could do it with states. That's I'll have to try and do that one. Yeah. Interestingly, though, whether this is pareidolia or not, it's just that they've just had that Dragon X ship go up from Elon Musk to dock with the International Space Station. And people have been pointing out the footage of the engine on that, and they've seen something running, what they perceive, someone's calling it a mouse running around the engine, and this is this is in the vacuum of space. So I'm trying to, they've zoomed in, you can definitely see something moving around it, whether it's part of the mechanics of the ship or something. I just haven't got a clue, but a lot of people are perceiving it as a rat or a mouse, so it's getting crazier.
Have you heard about the ISS live feed footage where they're saying they're seeing fleets of UFOs? Have you come across that?
I've heard something about that, where they supposedly kill the feed or something because they don't want the people to see. Steve, you're into the UFO thing, aren't you, a little bit?
Yeah. I think you know what, whenever I see something like that on Facebook or whatever, it could be the best footage, the best proof possible, but I always assume that it's some kind of computer generated image, and I just go past it.
That's the problem with the technology of today, with the computers and everything generating so much stuff that you start to view everything with a slight mistrust, and you could actually probably miss some gems that could be genuine. I mean, in the past, you could fake UFO pictures by doing double exposures or models and things like that, but you had to be fairly skilled at it. But these days, pretty much anyone can do a bit of photoshopping or something these days, can't they, to get something pretty fantastic looking. So that's like, I mean, you know, when you got the footage that they take of the Nimitz from the gun cameras of these aircraft, that's pretty convincing in my eyes, to be honest, where they, especially when the Pentagon's kind of put forward the idea that yes, this was genuine phenomena, and they've officially released it because there's lots of rumors circulating about it. So they've actually put it forward and now admitting they have been researching UFOs, although they don't actually call it that anymore. So anyway,
there are experts actually that can look very closely at the photograph, and they can tell by sort of the shadows of the overlay or whatever that whether it's fake or not, or whether it seems to be genuine. But I certainly don't have that capability.
Yeah, I mean, I look at a lot of stuff. I look at like some of the photographs, and some people just put them up and say, look at this, a mothership. And instantly I've taken a look at it, and it's like a cigar-shaped UFO or something, the mothership. And one of the factors that gives it away for me is, A, it looks too highly detailed. It almost looks like something out of a Chris Foss painting or something. And the next thing is that the shadows are not consistent with the rest of the shadows of the background.
Right.
So that just jumps out as me as totally fake, and I've had to say, well, look, actually, this looks fake to me, and they get really annoyed with me, and they just don't want to talk to me because I've upset their little apple cart of things, you know. But I try and look at it objectively. You know, I love it to be real, but unfortunately, there is a lot of false stuff out there.
Yeah, and some of it's not very good as well. Some of it is like obviously fake, and you just wonder how people could even believe that it's true in any way, shape, or form. What do you guys make of the coronavirus crop circle? Have you seen that at all?
Oh yeah, I think let's see. I don't know if I saw that or not.
I forgot actually where it is. I'll paste it in the chat so you can have a look. I don't know what to make of it. It's definitely like a coronavirus, but there's one strand coming off, and there's like almost like stone circles. I tell you what, have a chat, and I'll find it, and I'll paste it and see what you think.
I wouldn't know what to make of that. I looked into it at one point in time. Initially when they came on the scene, what about roughly 1980? Well, prior to the crop circles, we had saucer nests. There was the famous one in Queensland, Australia, and Ohio, and so forth. And that's something you could wrap your head around, because sometimes people would actually see a disc-shaped craft or whatever land in the distance, and then they would see this depressed area. And then later on, about I guess 1980, we started having these more complex circles, and they got more complex. And obviously, some of them were man-made. But you really start going down the rabbit hole, because some people have been out there, to do their meditation. They're out there with their boards and their rope, and it's under cover of darkness. And then all of a sudden, they see this light ball phenomena show up, and they didn't cause it, it's almost as if the whatever they are saying, hey, wait a minute, this is our job. What are you doing? Other people think that the simple act of creating these things in the field might somehow do some kind of earth forces or whatever generate the phenomena. So I've read reports where it's both ways, where people see the light, the saucer, or the just a light anomaly, and then see the crop circle form, or just a circle. And then you can go back into like 1927, 1933, and people, they used to call them devil twists and so forth, that actually see them swirling in the field without any kind of whirlwind or whatever. So it's very hard to grasp, what is it being caught? Are we causing it somehow? Is it some kind of earth thing? Or obviously back in 1927, I don't think we can blame the military with some kind of laser technology, or even, well, I guess aliens could be around in 1927, saying, hey, stick around. They're going to get even better in the next few decades. But so it's very difficult to try and sift through that as to what's anomalous and what's man-made.
So I've pasted the link, and anyone listening to the show, just Google mysterious 200-foot COVID crop circle, and you'll definitely find it. But as you say, we really don't know. You know, some of these probably are man-made, and I know there's been some. I think it's like TV adverts or magazine adverts where crop circles have been turned into corporate logos, which are, you know, obviously man-made. But as you say, there are some that have genuine anomalies. Things like something to do with the stems, whether they kind of crunch or not, or whether they kind of like split or not. There's also the radiation aspect. There's also witness testimony, I believe, from police officers who claim, Neil, you might be able to help me out on this one. A police officer in England at a crop circle claimed some figures, kind of alien type figures, were in the middle of a crop circle and started running towards him. Do you remember that one at all?
No. What was that? Like recently or many years ago?
No. This is like a classic case. Again, I'll have to dig it out. But what it was, I think it was a police officer who was just casually driving past, and I think two greys, I think they kind of described them as greys, were in this crop circle, and they noticed he was watching, and then they started running towards him, and I think they just disappeared. So there's a lot of odd things.
Wow. I know there's some.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I know there's some footage kicking around for many years, taken in about 1990, 91, probably done on VHS tape at the time. And it was a crop circle being formed. And I can't think who filmed it, but you could see these two lights or orbs spinning around, twirling around maybe a few feet above the crops, somewhere in Wiltshire. Can't remember the exact location. And within a few seconds, this whole crop circle just emerged. And this is, incredible. Considering it's 1990, there was no CGI graphics then. So this person was, whoever filmed it, they were on a high point on a hill somewhere, looking down into the field. And I think they'd been there all night. It's almost as if they were expecting something to happen. And just as it kind of got dawn, they saw these lights twirling around and this crop circle being formed. So
was that Milk Hill?
I can't remember the location exactly.
I remember the footage where they saw it, and they said, "Well, it's an owl, reflecting sunlight." And but later on, they who was it? There was one researcher, Dr. Simeon Hine, found out that the light anomaly passed over a tractor, and the tractor stalled until it moved off. I don't know if it's the same event or not. I know that Zelia has done a lot of research into light anomalies.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I found the article. So it's from the Telegraph, 20th of October 2009. It was a police sergeant in England, and what he actually saw was two. It wasn't greys. It was two tall whites, over 6 foot, with blonde hair. They seemed to be inspecting the crop, and apparently they started to. There was a crackling noise, and they ignored him at first, and then they began running at him. So yeah, I've remembered it correctly, apart from the fact it was tall whites except for greys. Interestingly, this was also in Wiltshire in England, and the COVID crop circle is also in Wiltshire. So whether it's the same crop circle field, I don't know, but it just gets stranger and stranger.
Yeah. Now the tall whites descriptions, they sound like the Nordics, classic.
The Nordics,
yeah. That's obviously where they make their snap, crackle, and pop. Hence the crackle. So yeah, Zelia, sorry, you were going to say about your own research into strange anomalous lights.
Oh yeah, no, I have a special interest in light ball and orb phenomena. And it's one of those things where you see this brought up a lot, and the interesting thing is that it kind of is shared by each different branch of paranormal study. You have ghost orbs, UFO orbs, and then of course there are even cryptids spotted with orbs. And the interesting thing is that, a lot of the time it's kind of defined by the situation which surrounds it, as opposed to any inherent quality of the actual orb itself. And I just, it's these patterns that kind of go across each different field of the paranormal that really stand out after a while.
Do these orbs have different colors for different kind of paranormal activity?
People put a lot of importance on the color. It seems as though it really is kind of across the board. I would say that in the U.S. especially, the amber-colored orbs are really, really prominent as far as, again, these are usually lopped in with UFO sightings. whereas kind of light blue or white ones are a lot more common closer to the ground, or especially in homes and things like that. But they can be, just kind of across the board. People report them in all different shades, and it doesn't seem to strictly correlate to, any different type of paranormal activity outside of it.
I'm just wondering if, like, at certain times of the year, these orbs are changing color, or depending on the manifestation, there might be a certain frequency of color that might correspond to, say, a ghost or something like that. It's interesting because I've heard of lots of cases where people have talked about mostly manifestations of aliens or UFOs. They always seem to describe a blue color. Now, there was a story that was actually told to me personally about 10 years ago now. I was actually doing a presentation at an English pub talking about ghosts and spirits and whatnot. And one of the audience members during the questions and answers asked me, he says, do ghosts come in different shapes and sizes? And I thought, oh, that's an interesting one. I said, well, why is that then? And he says, well, many, many years ago, I was working as a kind of science laboratory technician for a very, very hush-hush project for the Ministry of Defense. That's like the Department of Defense for the US. It was a company under contract to them, and we worked in this very old building. He didn't say where the building was, but him and his colleague were both working at their desks. And as they were both working at their desks, they suddenly noticed the whole room lit up blue. They thought, where's that blue light come from? They both looked round at each other, and they saw this gluing box about the size of a shoebox floating between them through the room. And it just went through the two doors at the end and turned right, went down the corridor, and they were totally gobsmacked. And they thought, oh, my God. So they went and found their boss, and they said, guess what we've seen? And they explained that they'd just seen this blue glowing box. And he said, come with me. And he took them to this old guy that'd been working at this place for years and years and years. And he said to them, tell this old chap here what you saw. So they told him about the blue glowing box. And this old guy said, yeah, I've seen it too. And so in my mind, it wasn't a ghost, but I suspect because they were doing something, what the guy described as the precursor to the silicon chip, they were developing that sort of technology. And I would put this about the year 1970, 71, something like that, that this, whatever it was, this blue glowing box had got an interest in whatever technology was being researched there. And whether it was foreign technology or it was alien or ultra-dimensional, who knows? But it's been seen there a couple of times, and it gave off this blue color. And I read some years later in a book where this security guard was in a similar kind of establishment doing a night shift, and he was patrolling the corridors, checking rooms were locked and things. And he said he saw a blue glowing light coming out of a room. So he went and opened up the door, and inside was this guy. He said that seemed to be wearing some sort of space helmet in a kind of suit, glowing blue, and he appeared to be thumbing through the filing cabinet of this room. And as soon as this, I'll call him a spaceman for want of a better description. As soon as this spaceman saw the security guard, he just vanished like that straight in front of him, dematerialized. And this poor security guard just had a nervous breakdown, and he was taken away. And next day they had all the military police there, or the Ministry of Defense agents and security people. And this person that told me this story, who worked there, overheard someone in another room, like one of the bosses, saying, whatever we do to try and stop them, they always manage to get their way in here. Whatever we do, we just can't stop them. And so I thought that was a very telling phrase to say. But again, that blue glowing light was associated with that manifestation as well, whatever that was. So I thought I'll just let you know.
No, the proximity of light anomalies to every different type of paranormal manifestation is something that I know John Keel was really interested in as well. I think that there came a point where he almost wondered if that was the truest part of, the phenomena. And, it is. You see it really in conjunction with every different type of paranormal manifestation. I think a lot of people are really hesitant, especially to accept the connection between cryptids and these light anomalies, but that there's definitely a connection there as well. So
now you mentioned John Keel there, and I know that both of you are fans of John Keel. Would one of you maybe explain to our listeners, for those that don't know, who John Keel is and why you're interested in him?
Zelia, why don't you start, and I'll I'll add on later.
All right. So John Keel, gosh, how do you really sum up his work? He's
I know it's not easy.
Yeah. He's, of course, best known, I would say, for the Mothman prophecies, which, in my opinion, is really one of the just absolute best cases to encapsulate all of these different types of, paranormal manifestations. And it's just really an interesting study. But, his work, I think that probably the biggest point to carry from it is that he really believed that there are patterns that exist between each apparently different type of paranormal manifestation. And, that these patterns are kind of indicative of something that has a much more far-reaching sort of explanation, than typically looking at it from the conventional standpoints of, UFOs are definitely only extraterrestrials coming from outer space, and cryptids are only undiscovered creatures, and ghosts are the spirits of the deceased. He thought that there was evidence to connect each of these apparently different fields. And two, the thing that I really appreciate about him as a researcher is that even though he offered that evidence and that option, he definitely didn't say that is the only option. He was very open-minded and just incredibly creative. And probably the point from his work that really stands out to me the most is his idea of the super spectrum, that a lot of these manifestations appear in our plane of existence from just outside the visible and audible spectrum of energy. And that really, it's a very neat, cohesive theory that explains a lot of the things that will often cause conventional science to kind of turn away from, taking these things seriously.
And Steve, you got some gaps to fill.
Yeah, that was a good way to present Keel. Although he wasn't static in his thinking. He was very, very open to, and you can see when you go through the different articles that he's written over the decades that he was entertaining different ideas. But Zelia and I were both influenced by his book called Operation Trojan Horse. Now, Trojan Horse took place. I mean, he wrote it after the events in Point Pleasant, but the Mothman prophecies came out later. It took years for that book to come out. But that's where he talks about the way that, and I didn't really like this idea at first because I was very comfortable with the idea that these landings, these entities were ET, and they were coming from other planets. Keel was able to demonstrate that it's likely, although he did not believe there was just one answer, but it's likely that these things are all connected. Ghostly phenomena, poltergeists, cryptids, UFOs, and so forth. They all seem to come together. And one of his biggest contributions was that Keel had these great catchphrases like, the great phonograph in the sky, because people would be getting these messages from they would think Beyond or the Space Brothers, but they're the same kind of message that have been coming through for hundreds of years in different guises. Another one was, ask the contactee what they had for breakfast. No pun intended to Mac Maloney's Military X-Files. But and what he meant was, ask the experiencer, the abductee or whatever. Don't just find out about their experience or their missing time or whatever. Find out all about them. And he would find that, and I have found this too in talking to people that have had abduction experiences, that they didn't just have this initial experience. They also were experiencing sometimes strange visitors, like, in quotes, the Men in Black, strange electronic interference in the home, classic haunting phenomena, shadow people, and just all kinds of, and also a lot of times people that have seen or experienced UFOs or that kind of an experience have also had seen cryptids, whether it be Bigfoot or something else. So it's and so often researchers would, if they had their own specialty, they would focus in one area, and they wouldn't ask all the other questions. And so because I had this background with learning about John Keel and what would John Keel do? What would he ask? I uncovered all kinds of things, and I even got a chance to talk to Alan Godfrey, who was, of course, was the gentleman that the police officer in Todd Morton back in 1980 that had an abduction experience. And during his experience, he talked about seeing a large black dog aboard this supposedly extraterrestrial spacecraft. The black shuck, the black spectral dog that shows up in old castles and the moors and so forth. What the heck? How does this fit into the paradigm? And there were so many I'll give it back to you, but there's so many parallels, as Keel and people like Jacques Vallée pointed out in Passport to Magonia. And I know you're writing a book on fairy folklore and so forth, and I'm sure you have seen the amazing parallels between, some modern day UFO experiences and classic traditions of folklore.
Yeah, that's right. The idea of missing time is a thing associated with the realm of the fairy. That if you, interestingly, I mean, it's probably the way they've worded it in the tales of it, that if you accept fairy food or that kind of thing, fairy drink, you can fall asleep maybe for 20 years or 7 years, whatever it may be, and come back and everything's changed. And you kind of have missing time, but a lot of missing time, not just a few hours. It can be quite a few years.
Yes.
So, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the people, I've been looking into more recent sightings of fairy encounters. I mean, there was this very, very interesting tale. And this kind of bends your understanding of what physics and reality is. And I first saw this in a film called The Fairy Faith by John Walker, Canadian filmmaker. And in the film, he goes around and meets various people from Scotland, Ireland, and Canada. And there was a guy that he spoke to who was, I think he was a Glaswegian builder. And he'd been on holiday to Southern Ireland somewhere, and he heard this weird music at the foot of this hill, which was well known in the area as a fairy mound or hill or something. And whilst this guy was looking up at the view of the rainbow forming overhead with the clouds part in the sun, because it just started to rain, he was distracted by something, and he could see something out the corner of his eye, and he could see this woman who was like a small woman, he said about 1 foot high, and she had brown leathery looking skin and a brown hat. And he said that where his shadow extended, it went up the hill slightly. And he said the woman was by his feet, and because he was sitting down at this point, the woman was by his feet, and she appeared to be cutting around the shadow with a pair of old style sheep shears. This small woman.
That Nicola Sturgeon again.
Yeah.
She gets everywhere, she does.
And where his shadow extended, there was another being up the hill who was the male equivalent of the woman, who appeared to be rolling up the guy's shadow as if it's like paper. And this guy, this Glaswegian builder, he said he was totally gobsmacked. He didn't know what to say other than "Oi!" And they both looked at each other as if to say, "Oh my God, he can see us," and poof, they just vanished. And it's like that completely defies reality or physics, the fact that you can supposedly cut shadows from people and roll them up like paper. And you think, how on earth do you explain that? But this guy was as presumably as honest as he was true. You know, he was trying to explain it as he saw it. And it'd be an incredibly weird thing to make up because it's just so off the wall. I don't know if John Keel covered that kind of stuff, but I mean, he had no missing time as far as I'm aware, but that was a very, very interesting thing. But it's very, very different from a typical ET alien abduction that we would describe anyway. But
the thing is with these scenarios is that I think there could be one of two possibilities going on, not only just with what you've described, Neil, but also things like alien encounters and abductions, is that there's what you might call a physical reality, i.e. a grey or whatever comes into your physical being and interacts with you on a physical level, moves objects, etc., etc. But then some people have also reported kind of almost like a parallel reality. You know, some people talk about kind of when they have these encounters, the birds stop chirping and, you know, the sky goes grey and even
the
some
Oz
people
factor,
saying,
as it's sometimes called.
Yeah,
exactly. Jenny Randall's, right?
Yeah.
And you know, could this be to do with somehow your own consciousness or your own mind is being projected into another reality? So you're not in this reality, Earth reality, whatever that is. You're in another reality, and it's not exactly happening in your mind, but your mind is not within your body, if that makes sense. So it's a really bizarre one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Charles Hickson experienced that too. You know, the Pascagoula fisherman. Yep. Charles Hickson, of course, Calvin Parker is alive and well and has been out on various talk shows. But Charles Hickson, he, even after that initial experience, he would be out hunting and he'd look up and he saw a craft moving across the sky, but he knew something was weird because everything went deathly silent. So that's I don't know what's going on there, but that also is described by I don't know if you're familiar with David Paulides in the Missing 411 books, the gentleman that documents all the bizarre missing, people missing. I mean, really bizarre experiences. He has found parallels with fairy lore, and also he himself experienced the Oz factor one time when he was out hunting with somebody. But so it's one of these things that just covers all areas. I was going to mention when you talked about the food from Fairyland, one of Zelia's favorite stories, and mine too, comes right out of her own state. Joe Symington and the pancakes from outer space.
I've heard of this.
He didn't go to sleep, but they didn't taste very good. But if you want to have Zelia start to talk about that, there's so many interesting offshoots from that particular story, and it's just a fascinating story. What is it? Did the fairies come and visit Joe, or were they E.T.?
Well, it is actually, I would say, probably my favorite encounter with UFO occupants. And I know it's kind of an outlier, it's not a really super duper dramatic case. But it was in April of 1961, Eagle River, Wisconsin. Joe Symington was eating his breakfast when he looked outside and he saw this really classic UFO. It even had little exhaust pipes all over it. He said it was like very shiny, bright, silver, metallic looking. And so it was floating right above his backyard. So he walked out and a door opened in the side and he saw 3 little men inside. And he said that they actually looked like very small Italian men wearing 2-piece black knit, turtleneck suits and little black knit caps. And so somehow he understood from one of them that they needed water. This being gave him this little kind of like almost like a chalice or something. And so Joe Symington, just completely nonplussed, was like, oh, sure, I'll get you some water. So he went and he got some water, brought it back. And then when he gave them the water, he noticed that one of them appeared to be cooking something on a flameless grill. And so he kind of motioned to, hey, what's that guy doing? And apparently the leader, who was denoted by a red stripe that ran down his pants, kind of like tracksuit pants, took it that he wanted a sample. So took the water, went back into the craft, and came back with 3 small alien pancakes. And so he gave them to Joe Symington. The craft took off. And, it's a really fantastic encounter because, at the time, no one really wanted to handle it. I mean, it was pretty much rejected by the mainstream ufologists of the day because it seems like such a ridiculous encounter. And this is something that Jacques Vallée really pointed out, is that there is a huge precedent in folklore between fairies and flatbreads. And so, it's very intriguing that the objects in question were pancakes, which, as Joe Symington found out because he decided to taste one, tasted horrible, and they kind of were like cardboard. But I think the really intriguing part of this, too, because you have this encounter and everyone really said that Joe Symington was a very truthful, honest man. And, Hynek, who at the time was actually investigating the case, at first didn't give it that much credibility. But as the years went on, he really believed that Joe Symington believed in his encounter. But the kicker here is that the pancakes, one of them was actually analyzed, and it was found to consist entirely of earthly materials. The strangest thing, I think it was like buckwheat hulls and something kind of like Crisco. But the strangest thing there is that it was absolutely devoid of salt. Even the typical ingredients, which should have contained salt, had no salt in them. And again, this is something Vallée pointed out, is that there is a precedent throughout fairy lore that fairies will not eat salt. So it's a very bizarre case, and it has one of those really classic, Keel called it the physical non-evidence. These cases where people are given artifacts and promised that they're space rocks, or in this case, space pancakes. And it turns out they're just simple earthly materials. So really an intriguing case.
Yeah, I'd like to add something to that. When there was a local judge there that knew Joe and knew him to be trustworthy, but he interviewed him, and he started a little bit tongue in cheek, when he said, "Well, Joe, what do these guys look like? They were about 5 feet tall in coveralls and so forth." He said, "Did they look like little green men?" And Joe says, No, Judge, they were kind of swarthy looking, like Italians. Okay. And then, so John Keel in Trojan Horse points out that he found an old press conference from General Spaatz of World War II. And in part of this conference, he's talking about how, and I don't know the context, but he's talking about how there's no truth to the rumor that Spaniards are flying UFOs or that they're piloting them. And Keel at that time was getting some reports from people that some of the occupants. Now, this is before the Greys came in. The Greys kind of came in late 70s and early 80s in mass. I mean, you could find them occasionally, but it's very interesting the way the appearance of the humanoids changed over the years. But he was finding the same kind of, in quotes, occupants that people were reporting. And they also kind of looked like some of the reports of what we call the Men in Black. Even the infamous Indrid Cold of Mothman fame kind of resembled this. And it's interesting because Keel would talk to these people that claimed they had this encounter with these people that showed up acting strangely or telling them to not talk about their UFO sighting. And he would carry a lot of photographs around of different ethnic groups to see if he could focus in on what they looked like. Well, the one ethnic group that everybody said that's what they looked like were Laplanders. Now, Keel was not suggesting that Laplanders or maybe even Spaniards or Italians had some kind of secret space program, but it's just very interesting that that's what people were reporting. So you get these weird consistencies. And then also, Zelia mentioned something she pointed out that I didn't really catch was this chalice or this bowl or whatever they handed Joe to give them water was the same, looked like it was exactly the same material as the, in quotes, spacecraft. Well, at first, the absurdity. Okay, so they're ET, but they're taking up space for food with a flameless grill. They don't have freeze-dried food. They don't have Tang like the astronauts did, right? I mean, where you can just, have just take up a little bit of space. They've got to get water from an outside source, whether they need to drink it or analyze it. Doesn't make any sense. And as you guys know, if you look through UFO lore, there's all kinds of instances where the entities collect water through a hose. They might suck it up. But there's also a weird case in California in about 53, 55. Two miners are out there. They've been seeing this UFO overhead for a while. And at one point, one of the guys, John Black, he's in the woods. He sees what he thinks is a kid fishing by the stream, looks a little closer. It's not a kid. It's some little guy in kind of a suit with a tie. He's got a bucket. He collects the water. He very quietly follows this entity outside the woods. He sees a landed craft that they had seen before. This guy climbs up the ladder with his bucket of water and takes off. Now, how the heck do we process that?
It's interesting. Some of those cases remind me of older cases that I heard where people were calling them phantom airships, and they were seen all over the United States in the 1800s. And again, the occupants would land in these what they were described as airships by the populace at the time. Obviously, they couldn't call them flying saucers, so they would call them phantom airships. And maybe they were balloon structures, or maybe they were typical flying saucers. I don't know. But a lot of the people there seemed to be humanoid, and they'd be getting out, and they would ask directions. Typically, can you tell me where so and so is? And they would say, "Oh, can I have some?" Bluestone, I think, was one of the requests, a particular bluestone or something like that. Is that something you've heard that one, Steve?
Yes, but I have to tell you that, as you know, Zelia also has a YouTube channel called Just Another Tinfoil Hat. And recently she just finished her airship trilogy, where she's just done a lot of research on that. So she's, I have something to add, but she's got a lot of really good information on the crazy, and there were several waves of airships. But yeah, Zelia is kind of the expert at the moment on the airships.
Yeah, the wave in the United. Oh, yeah, sure thing. The wave in the United States between 1896 and 1897 is really, it's just so interesting because it has all the hallmarks of these later UFO flaps. I mean, among other things, not only were people seeing a wide variety of things in the sky, such as, like you mentioned, the airships that really fit the model of where they assumed technology was going to be heading, but they're also seeing, just kind of random lights, strange flashing objects and things like that. There's one weird account where the person even described it as like a giant sheet of canvas kind of twisting around up in the sky. So not only is it, you see that a lot in recent flaps too, where you have a huge variety of things in the sky, but there are also even flare-ups in wild man sightings in some of these places where these objects were being spotted. And, too, this happens quite a bit. Momo, the Missouri Monster, actually, that whole event happened. It was spotted so many times in conjunction with sightings of things in the sky. So, you do have kind of these weird flare-ups in cryptid reports and also UFO reports. But yeah, no, the accounts from that time frame are just really intriguing because, yeah, there is that one famous account where the occupants landed and actually gave a guy some money to go purchase, I believe it was bluestone and then some other just really conventional hardware type objects. And, it's one of those things too. So often these airships were crashing. And that's another really common narrative in the current, UFO or flying saucer lore. So often these crafts are crashing into the land. And, it's one of those things if we're looking at these super vehicles from outer space, I really wonder why like about 80% of them seem to be absolute lemons. But, the airship, I think it's interesting too, because the period of time in which these people were seeing these things, I think in a way it's kind of a bridge between how we looked at the UFO phenomena. Before that, you have people referring to things in the sky as sightings of fairies or demons, angels, even witches. And after that, of course, in the mid-1900s, you have people accepting the extraterrestrial hypothesis. And in that sliver of time between that, you have people referring to it as an airship. And, the predominant belief was that somebody somewhere had mastered the flying machine. So it's just interesting to see kind of how the belief systems move around the phenomenon.
Mm. And there's one particular case that I think Keel stumbled on. He was probably in West Virginia during that year of the Mothman sightings, but he ran into a gentleman that had a weird experience back around. It was about World War I guess. And again, when Zelia talked about how these things appear to crash, they saw this craft. It looked kind of like a plane, but no wings or whatever, just kind of a long cigar thing. And it seemed to go down in the woods some distance away. So a bunch of the locals congregated on the area, and they found this thing landed. They found the individuals there seemed to be not really want them around, but some of them appeared, in quotes, to be kind of short and Asian, and others I think looked more like perhaps your standard West Virginian or whatever. But they were told, don't worry, we're okay here. We're going to contact the local sheriff and we're fine. But the guy couldn't figure out how did this thing even fly. And it's funny because he says, well, he saw this part of the wreckage on the ground. And he said, so I picked up this thingamajig and I put it in my pocket. So he goes home, and that night, about 2 or 3 in the morning, he gets a knock on the door, and he goes to the door, and there's a guy in kind of the old standard World War I uniform with a wide brim hat, and this guy simply says, "You've got something that belongs to us." And he couldn't think what it was at first because he's kind of befuddled. And then he goes and he thinks, oh my God. So he takes this thing and hands it to him, and he takes off. It's almost like shades of an early Men in Black, because when Keel talked about Men in Black, it was a generic term. It didn't literally mean people in black suits and fedoras or whatever. But what a strange, it's kind of is woven into the airship mystery. And then, of course, you get into all the other manifestations of weird craft in the sky. They're not just the and even nowadays, it seems like there's more in the way of light anomalies than your classic disc-shaped flying saucers. But yeah, it's just one of those fascinating areas that Keel covers quite a bit in Trojan Horse.
Steve, going back to the Mothman things, when that came out, it was probably about 15 years ago. It was quite a long time ago, wasn't it? The movie, anyway. I know the book was
2002 was the movie.
2002. Wow, that long. But it freaked me out because it was based on alleged true stories, which I've no doubt it is, and because I was into the paranormal, so I wouldn't necessarily say that I believed it, but I was open-minded to the possibility that it could be true. I found it absolutely terrifying, but I couldn't quite work out, was the Mothman creature a positive force trying to warn people of upcoming danger, or was it a negative force either warning people because it wanted to cause chaos, or was it actually causing the chaos itself? What's your kind of take on it?
It may not have been a harbinger at all. I know that I talked to one of the Mothman witnesses, Robin Bellamy, who saw it standing on the shore of the Ohio River when she was about 14, I think.
Wow.
She firmly believed that it would actually cause the disaster. There's a lot of people. I'm not sure that it did. It just seemed like it was. There were all kinds of bizarre things going on at the same time.
How did she describe it? I'm really intrigued.
It looked like she didn't get a good look at it, and it may, she admits it may not have actually been the Mothman. It almost looked like a guy standing there in a wetsuit, but it wasn't somebody in a wetsuit. So, but again, she's a young child. Perhaps it was a
diver or something.
Who knows? I mean, it was just a very quick glance. But I've also talked to Linda Scarberry, one of the original witnesses, the two couples that were chased down Route 62 out of the what they call the TNT area, which is that munitions area where they developed explosives for World War II, and they kept them in these concrete igloos or bunkers. And that's where they first saw this thing on the ground. Its wing seemed to be caught in the fence. It had red glowing eyes, was roughly humanoid in shape, and it chased their car. So I talked to Linda Scarberry about her. She had the classic sighting. Another gentleman, Tom Urey, he saw something more like a Thunderbird. It was not the Mothman. And in fact, he thought some of the other witnesses saw the same thing he did, but perhaps were freaked out by it, that they imagined the rest of it. But once he started talking to some of the other witnesses, he decided that they had seen different things. But that seems to be characteristic of these areas, these window areas, if you will, as Keel called them, where all this different types of phenomena occur. And I want to give this to Zelia in a moment, in just a second. But the thing about the Mothman was, it was a paradox. It was about 7 feet tall. It had about a 10-foot wingspan, probably not wide enough to lift something that with that weight. Not eye shine, apparently red glowing eyes. Keel received a couple reports where it seemed like it gave off some kind of a mechanical or humming or engine noise or something like that when people saw it close. Mrs. Thomas saw it in the TNT area toward the end of that year, and it was walking through the TNT area like a robot. Other times it seemed like a flesh and blood creature. Sometimes it seemed like an apparition. Who knows what this was? But I've said before that if this was some kind of a, like a banshee, a warning or whatever, it did a really bad job. Can't these entities just say, hey, a year from now, don't go on the bridge. Don't dance around. Don't give us symbolism. Give us something substantive.
And Zelia, you have something to add?
Yeah. Zelia, I'd be curious as to what it was like when you first read the Mothman prophecy.
And so when I watched the movie, I was sitting through it and I was like, oh, this is cool, but I'm sure they really exaggerated things, as they usually do when they make film versions of true events. And then I read the book and I was like, oh, not only did they not exaggerate, they actually did not take the phenomena half as far as it could have gone. That's right. I mean, it's true. The book is really, it's also a very, it's a very intimate look actually at what was going on in Point Pleasant at the time. You get really kind of involved in the lives of many of these witnesses. And, I think that Keel really did too. And I think that really comes across. But no, it's interesting because the Mothman, a lot of people do almost blame it for the bridge collapse. I know that when I had read about it prior to the Mothman prophecies, it was either portrayed as a cryptid, and then there was usually the side note that some people believe that it actually caused the bridge to go down. Personally, myself, I think that in a way, just the heightened phenomena that was going on in Point Pleasant at the time, the heightened UFO phenomena, the heightened poltergeist phenomena, as well as the Mothman, that kind of has more to do with being some sort of omen than strictly the Mothman. I know that Jacques Vallée pointed out that a lot of, high UFO times actually occur in times of great unrest or prior to disasters. So I think that as opposed to the Mothman simply being the omen or the harbinger or anything like that, it was kind of just the upped activity going on at the time, which did drop off significantly after the tragedy. Though, of course, that area around Point Pleasant, it does seem to be kind of like one of those window areas where strange things just seem to happen fairly consistently. So I don't think the activity ever really went away completely. But it definitely was heightened around that time.
What were some of the major things that happened in the book that weren't in the movie that you could highlight?
I think that some of the best ones were probably Keel's sightings of unexplained light phenomena. He talks about these purple blobs. I actually listened to a fantastic interview where he referred to them as his purple friends that were showing up in the skies. And, that happened quite a bit throughout the book. And it gave kind of, this really very real sort of visceral feeling to it that, this stuff was ever present. It was always going on. And, I think there was one classic example where he had a flashlight that he would click on up at these things to try and get them to respond. And, there was this one particular instance where he clicked out Morse code for descend, and the object or blob or light or whatever you want to call it actually did descend. And this, that just brings up so many questions for me because, if we are dealing with some sort of, extraterrestrial race, I mean, some people would say, oh, well, of course they know Morse code, but I have to wonder about that. It seems like it is very much connected to the observer and the witness. So it was actually, things like that just really stood out. And there was also, they did get kind of hit the misdirection of concern. They hit that very well in the movie, I think, because, he was directly involved with many people who believed they were getting prophecies about something happening on the 15th of December. He just thought it was something completely different. So that's something that they really kind of hit the nail on the head with, in my opinion.
Also, another thing that they didn't really get into was the Men in Black phenomena, because people like Mary Heyer, the newspaper lady that became a colleague of his, a colleague and friend, so many people were having visits by these really odd characters. I mean, who knows what they were, but I think what happened was the Men in Black movies came out before Prophecies did, and treated the Men in Black phenomena in a very silly way. In fact, the Men in Black movies were based on a graphic novel, which was loosely based on the, in quotes, real Men in Black folklore, and the characters J and K were after John Keel. So there's a reference there. So I think they felt that if they did something too close to the Men in Black in the book, people would just start to giggle because they'd be thinking about the silly movies. Keel was actually giddy when he finally got this last screenplay that was made into his film. He held off for years, and he's told a friend of his, he said, they've updated it and they've got my character married and so forth, but they finally have eked out some of the basic truths of the book. And they really did. And when he had an interview with Art Bell in 2002, one of the first interviews he'd done in a long time. And he talked about how the film really captured the paranoia that he felt because he was very caught up in these very strange events. And so that's what he really liked what they did with the film, even though they took a lot of license.
Interesting. Right, we're just coming up to a break here, guys and girls. So very interesting stuff, though. I'd like to go more into John Keel and his research, because he sounds like a very fascinating guy that I would certainly like to find out more about. So for the moment, ladies and gents, Paranormal Peep Show, and we're talking to Steve Ward and Zelia Edgar, who are co-correspondents, co-presenters on the Paranormal UK Radio Network, and you can join us in part 2 in just a minute.
This is Barry Fitzgerald from Ghost Hunters International. In my book, In the Mist of Gods, I explore the world of the fairies or fae. This is not the whimsical winged creatures romanticized in modern literature and popular culture, but old-world, intelligent, and sometimes dangerous beings hidden in the tunnels, mounds, and raths in countries all over the world. Known by many names, the Fae coexist with mankind and at times come in direct contact with unsuspecting people whose lives are changed forever. In the Mist of Gods is a powerful book that chronicles my years of research into the enigma and legend of the fairy and examines their metamorphosis into the modern-day extraterrestrial phenomena. In the Mist of Gods is available in both softcover and Kindle format on Amazon and on glennandtea.com.
relax, and enjoy the show.
Welcome back to the Paranormal Peep Show, and we're talking with Andy, of course, and myself, Neil Geddes-Ward, and we've got Steve Ward and also Zelia Edgar joining us from the other shows on the Paranormal UK Radio Network, and we've been talking about the Mothman prophecies, UFOs, and John Keel. Now, Steve, you got some other interesting anecdotes about John Keel, and also a little bit more about the bridge that occurred towards the end of the Mothman film, or the story.
Yes, the first major sighting. It wasn't necessarily the first sighting, but the first major sighting that occurred on November 15th, 1966, with the Scarberries and the Mallets, two couples that were chased by some kind of a winged humanoid down Route 62. Well, 13 months to the day is when the Silver Bridge collapsed. Now, the Silver Bridge connected Point Pleasant, West Virginia, and Gallipolis, Ohio. And it was December 15th. It was rush hour traffic. It was Christmas traffic. It was bitter cold, about 22 degrees, and the sun was just about down when the bridge went down. Well, it's interesting that if you go back to, I'm not sure the year, I don't know if it's early century, 1913 or whatever. If you go upriver a ways, with the Elk River, I guess at some point comes into the Ohio, there was a bridge that collapsed on December 15th as well. A smaller bridge had there were people on it, but it's just very strange that another bridge in the same general area collapsed on the same day. Also, if you go back around World War I in that area, the Kanawha Valley, the Kanawha River and the Ohio come together. And that's where Mary Heyer, which I mentioned earlier, was the reporter that John Keel worked with. She had a column where she talked about Mothman and the Men in Black and the UFO sightings and so forth, called Where the Waters Mingle. And that was a reference to the two rivers that came together. Well, around in the Kanawha Valley, around World War I, there's a book called Haunted Valley, where they describe some people seeing some kind of a winged creature. It didn't look like the Mothman, but it was whatever they were. They had human heads, it seemed like. Nobody saw them close, had a 12-foot wingspan, kind of red plumage, and supposedly people were keeping their children indoors because they were afraid these things might swoop down. Very little information on that, and I haven't found anything to confirm it. But just very interesting that in this area, you've got a couple bridge collapses on the same day. You also have, and that's another thing about this phenomena, people will call other winged creatures the Mothman when they don't really appear to be the Mothman or quite the same. If these things are more of a paranormal realm, John Keel would talk about, he used the term transmogrification, because he thought perhaps these things they weren't hallucinations, but they were perhaps temporarily real. Zelia gave a nod to this earlier, where she talked about how Keel thought that the lights, what he called the soft sightings, might actually be the real phenomena. And when we see the cryptid, the shambling biped, the what seems to be the hard object, the craft, that might be something that is just a temporary manifestation of energy, or perhaps even we're being programmed to see these things. But perhaps the energy, the element behind it is something else. But, sometimes we'll see the fairies. Sometimes we'll see different kinds of humanoids. And that's another thing. I want to give this back to Zelia, because she wrote a really interesting article for Brent Rain's online magazine, Alternate Perceptions, which deals with that conundrum about the entities and the type of clothing they're wearing. That's really interesting, this article that she wrote about.
Yeah, so the article in question was Knit Caps and Coveralls, the issue of UFO occupant clothing. And aside from the paranormal, I actually have a major interest in costuming, especially in film, and how that, sort of really, it's the driving force in how you perceive characters, in my opinion. So obviously clothing and costumes are something very intriguing to me. And I picked up on this idea actually when I was researching the Flatwoods Monster, which of course is it kind of looks like a giant robotic sort of creature that was spotted in Flatwoods, West Virginia, in conjunction with some UFO sightings in the region. And, it's kind of got the classic, the Ace of Spades shaped head, I think is what a lot of people think of when they think of it. And what really stood out to me is the fact that, all the initial witnesses said that the thing looked very robotic. it didn't appear to be some sort of biological organism. And as I'm researching that, I'm thinking to myself, this is exactly what we really should be expecting to come from any sort of extraterrestrial visitation. We should be expecting drones or robots or, hazmat suits, things like that. But in reality, I would say that probably most sightings of UFO occupants, they are dressed in something that is not at all protective. There's no protective gear, either breathing apparatus in most cases. These things kind of fall in line almost with earlier sightings of fairies. People like Simonton's encounter with the turtlenecks and little knit caps. People say that they see them in coveralls or even tunics sometimes. And so, this one small issue, that of, the clothing of UFO occupants, I think it points to kind of a larger issue that these sightings are very malleable and very subjective to the cultural background of the witness and even possibly, the witness's own personal symbolism. Because you kind of see these trends too throughout time. I know in the 50s through like the 60s, people were reporting a lot of these entities wearing things that looked almost like diving suits, and I think that is, as we were kind of coming into this notion of out of space visitors, we were seeing something that could correlate to, a breathing apparatus or something like that. And then eventually that molded in to the gray phenomena, which is very prevalent even today. So, yeah, it's just kind of intriguing, small little detail that, seems to be kind of exploited by the cultural symbolism.
It's interesting you talk about the protective suits, because I was chatting to some friends of mine the other evening, and that's they host the Twin Souls radio program on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. That's Philip and Ronnie Kinsella. Andy knows them very well. Yeah. And I've been chatting to them regularly every Friday night via Skype, not recording, just a friendly chit-chat, catch-up and stuff, and we kind of go through our little theories together. And one of the things that struck me is that if you think of like War of the Worlds, H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds, at the end of the film, the aliens die because they haven't got any bodily defense systems against our bacteria, where we've developed it for millennia and got inoculated, self-inoculated, if you like. Now, interestingly, for instance, we mentioned the Pascagoula case earlier on, where I believe Calvin Parker, when he encountered what he described as a female alien, I think this might have been in the second encounter with them, maybe rather than the first, but I'm not 100% certain that, is that she stuck her fingers down his throat and it caused him to bleed or something like that. And also, I believe in the Betty and Barney Hill encounter in 1961, the alien came into the room to Betty and stuck his fingers into her mouth to try and remove her teeth, because apparently Barney had false teeth and they were trying to check to see if Betty also had false teeth, but she hadn't. Now they're sitting there putting their own bare hands into their mouths full of bacteria in both of these cases, and there doesn't seem to be any fear on part of the creatures, entities, aliens, whatever, about catching something from them. Yet if we were going to go to an alien planet, say, we would be wearing all kinds of protective suits, gloves and everything, even before we got within 2 feet of an alien, before we even touched them, in case we caught something. And I just thought it's a very interesting thing. They don't seem to be concerned about catching any kind of bacterial infection. It's almost as if they've got total protection, whatever space or dimension they come from.
Although some have, are completely encased, like in Dublin, Wales in 1977, they saw these 7-foot humanoids in what they would call boiler suits, where they were completely cut. Well, sometimes they were. Sometimes they didn't have a helmet on.
That was the fashion.
Yeah,
of the 70s.
That's it. Yeah, that's right. And they probably had, the 70s kind of hair and everything too. Boy, that's scary. But back to the folklore connection, and you mentioned Betty and Barney Hill. There's an interesting aspect of that actually stranger things happen to them after the abduction experience. But before that, they remember when Betty is given she wants this book. She sees this book with these strange photographs and the strange writing, and that's to be her proof. She'll know that this crazy experience, she'll have something she can prove it happened to her. Well, I'm sure Neil, with fairy lore, there's all these different stories about somebody is whisked away or goes to fairyland, and they might see a precious jewel, or they might be given something to take with them. And when they leave, it either vanishes or the jewel turns into a spider or whatever. You just don't get to take those things away from fairyland. Well, as she and Barney are about to leave, the leader, the one that said that she could have the book, he said, "I'm sorry, you can't have the book. The others object." And she's very upset. It's almost like the same motif brushed off for modern day. Of the idea where you just can't get anything out of fairyland. But also when, and I won't go into it too much, but they had just bizarre experiences once they got back. They had typical haunting phenomena, footsteps, poltergeist phenomena, things moved around the house. Some of the things that were happening to them were certainly of human origin, because their phone was tapped and so forth, and people were snooping around their house. They were plagued by men in green. Gentlemen in coveralls would keep coming to the door saying they had to check their meter. And she found out later that the regular meter guys wore blue coveralls, so they couldn't even get that right. So somebody was messing with them. But they had there was Barney Jr., Barney's son, was stationed in Panama. When he was on watch at night, a very strange character, all dressed in white, that called himself Mr. Geist, would strike up a conversation with him and ask him all about the events that happened to his father and his stepmother. When the brass found out about it, they were all incensed, like, what the heck is this? Who is this guy? And it gets even stranger, where Betty made some attempts, telepathic attempts to contact the aliens again, and then it gets really weird. But the Betty and Barney Hill used to be my classic go-to. Well, John Keel said it might not be E.T., it could be these other things. I'd always go back to Betty and Barney Hill and think, that's the classic E.T. Event right there. But then when you look at the broad spectrum, it starts to become a gray area.
I've been thinking about that for a few years, actually. There are things like ghosts and psychic phenomena that different from multidimensional and interdimensional entities, and even fairy experiences.
I know some people that investigated the Webb Library in North Carolina for a couple of years. The lady was sensitive, and Joey would use the equipment and so forth. They had many people in over the years. They actually experienced, intuited, a couple of the apparitions looked exactly like classic Men in Black. Fedoras, the trench coat. They were harassing another spirit, supposedly. And
Really?
Also, strange lights and UFOs were seen in the vicinity of the library. Now, I don't know what to make of that, but it's like you just can't escape the connections that keep popping up.
Just describe harassing other spirits. Are you saying that Men in Black were in spirit? Are you saying?
I don't remember the exact events, but they were. It's in a book called "Watch Out for the Hallway" by Joey and Tanya Medea, and they were intimidating. Or how you hear sometimes there's supposed to be a stronger presence amongst the spirits that kind of suppress, or I don't know, bully, for lack of a better word. So I can't give you the specifics, but it was kind of like that. And I thought, man, it doesn't matter if these clowns are alive or dead; they're still harassing people.
Is the Men in Black anyway connected with the Hat Man sightings? Because I happened to see something on Amazon Prime the other night about the Hat Man and various sightings and that, and I thought, well, it's almost like a bit like the Men in Black. There's just one guy by himself coming up the stairs or appearing in the rooms or the doorways or whatever like that, and it's all very dark. And sometimes you can see little glowing red eyes, sometimes you can't. Sometimes you just see a silhouette, but it always seems to be wearing this kind of hat shape.
Right,
and he seems very evil and foreboding, but nothing of harm seems to come to the people from what I remember of the documentary, at least, anyway.
Let me just say one quick thing. I'll turn it over to Zelia. Rosemary Ellen Guiley, who we lost a couple of years ago, a great lady, and her company is still going to be publishing my book that will be coming out with Joey Medea. But I met her at the Mothman Festival back in 2006, I guess it was. And she was investigating shadow people. She was collecting reports from people that would have these, whether they were apparitions in their house or whatever. And so the next year when she gave her talk at the festival, she discovered that a very significant percentage of those people that were experiencing these, whatever they were, entities, apparitions, were also experiencing classic alien abduction phenomena. So when I talked to a young lady from New Hampshire a couple of years ago, she'd had missing time. She eventually had a breakthrough. But before she even had her breakthrough, I was asking the John Keel style questions and found out she had experienced haunting phenomena and so forth. She also experienced a shadow person. And, again, they seem to be connected, but don't ask me how. I don't really understand it. I don't know if, Zelia, if you've done more research into the Hat Man or shadow people or not.
A little bit. And I would say that there is a connection, and I think that it has to do again with kind of like the symbolism that you see, because even, there's conventional hauntings where people will see something, a figure that actually does appear to be almost exactly like your classic Men in Black. And all of this kind of does, it's not really like there are really set boundaries with this stuff. It all kind of bleeds one into the other. And so I think that, this severe negativity that people will have, whether it's with an actual Man in Black encounter where you believe that it's some sort of physical being, or a shadow man or hat man encounter, or even just, one of these apparitions, they seem to really be accompanied by strong negativity. And so I think that there is a definite connection there. And then too, there's so many Men in Black encounters where they demonstrate these otherworldly feats, and so I think that, yeah, there is a huge connection. I think it could even be extended to some classic vampire lore, especially when you look at some of these more recent cases where the Men in Black, they always ask to be let into the home. And then when people actually do let them into the home, they wonder why they did. And, that's such a classic example with, a lot of these older vampire cases, right down to, possible hypnotism, the feeling of paralysis, and of course, terror. So I would say that there is a connection there.
Does anything actually happen to these people once they've let the Men in Black into their home? And, anything really bad?
For the most part, and Steve, I'm not sure if you've heard of any cases where something really does happen. It seems like the threats are almost the worst it ever gets, but the threats are enough for people. Many people have actually turned away, especially from UFO study, just because of, what the Men in Black have implied. So as far as I know, yeah, there's no real physical material harm that happens from that. In most of the cases.
Hand in hand with that, you've also got the black-eyed children as well. They seem to turn up as well. Have you guys come across any of these? You must have come across some black-eyed children stories.
Just before we get to that, Jenny Randalls, she wrote a book on the Men in Black. Over here, it's called The Truth Behind the Men in Black. I think the British title is different. I'm not sure. But there was a case where a young woman witnessed a UFO. Now, I don't remember if she reported it or not, but two gentlemen came to the door, very, very fleshly gentlemen. They seemed to be from the government. And her parents didn't understand why they just let them in without any question. They just opened the door and let them in. It was kind of weird. The one started asking her, firing questions at her. And it was very kind of rude and just one after another. And again, the parents afterwards wondered, what the heck, why did we not react to it? And so Jenny Randalls got the idea that, well, why don't we just put her under regressive hypnosis, even though there doesn't seem to be anything hidden here. Let's see what happened. Well, to this woman's viewpoint, the one man was asking her those questions. The other man was asking her a set of telepathic questions in between the other ones. Neither set of questions was particularly revealing, or the questions weren't particularly smart, but it's just one of these, it's like another nightmare scenario that doesn't make any sense. But and later on, I have another a Men in Black experience to tell you about that was more angelic. But I don't know what Zelia thinks about black-eyed children. When I met David Weatherly, who wrote one of the first books on black-eyed children. And initially, I thought we were dealing with urban legends, as he did. But the more I get into it, the more it seems like it's a real phenomena. People have tried to suggest that they might be grays or alien. It's just a very negative experience. It just I don't know what would cause these things. One interesting thing about that, and I'll give it to Zelia. Both Nick Redfern and David Weatherly have said that when, Nick Redfern has said that when he talks about black-eyed children and men in black on the radio sometimes, the electronics go crazy. They'll lose the signal or whatever. I'll say the same with David Weatherly said the people that were reading his book on the black-eyed children, they would have weird phenomena go on in their house. Their lights would start flashing and so forth. There's something there that I don't know how substantive is. I don't know what the origin is, but I've not. I was out in what they call a watershed area in upstate New York, not too far some of the stone chambers, right next to an area called Hawk Rock, where there's supposed to have been a lot of paranormal activity. So like an idiot, I went out there alone overnight one night, and I'm sitting there. This is before I read David Paulides' stuff on Missing 411. If I'd read any of his stuff, I wouldn't have been stupid enough to go out there. But nevertheless, I'm sitting there, and in the middle of the night, I start thinking about black-eyed children, and I think, oh my God, don't do that. But I'll turn it over to Zelia if she has anything else to say.
Yeah, I haven't done much extensive research into the black-eyed children, but I have done a little bit of research. And, I think too, again, they seem to be very similar, in my opinion, at least, to the Men in Black phenomenon, just with that strong negative reaction that people get that is almost unaccountable, even though these situations are often very strange and frightening. There's almost like an added just inherent terror that these things seem to possess. I think that the thing that really I find intriguing about it, though, at least in many of the cases I've read, is that it seems like many of these sightings of the black-eyed children begin with an idea that they need help. That's often what they say to the witness. And I think that, on many levels, that is incredibly unsettling. But I think that probably from a psychological angle, studies have shown that typically if you ask someone for a favor, it makes them likelier to like and accept you. And I see that quite a bit across, actually, the paranormal, this implication that assistance is needed. And that's the aspect that really does creep me out probably more than anything, is that many of these encounters do begin with that very specific, request for assistance or help of some sort. So
I'm just wondering if all of these different forms are just different forms, but the same energy or the same entity. I mean, what if the Greys, the Reptilians, the Men in Black, even the black-eyed children, and maybe some ghost phenomena are basically just some kind of weird etheric force that's kind of either changing form or playing on our perceptions. And I say that because the Slender Man started off as like a cartoon character or like a comic book kind of character. And yet some people swear blind they started seeing this Slender Man, but the Slender Man is fiction. So is it some kind of like negative entity that's going into our consciousnesses, weeding out all the things that we fear, then bringing them into our reality?
Well, I think that, and I do believe that much of this phenomena, and again, I think there's probably way more than one right answer for all these different types of paranormal phenomena, but I think that a huge portion of it is very malleable to current symbolism and current archetypes and things like that. And one really fantastic example of that came from, I think it was it the Eighth Tower, where John Keel was talking about, he was noticing that his research would sometimes be mirrored by new reports. And so for the heck of it, he was toying just in his head, just thinking that, what if these Men in Black are aquatic? And then I think it was later that week, he got a report where this guy said, "You're not going to believe me, but I had encountered with a Men in Black. He was wearing a turtleneck, and when he pulled it down, he had gills." So I think that there is strong evidence that some of these encounters are really, susceptible to being molded by belief systems or, a person's even just thoughts, things like that.
Yeah, you got to wonder why. What is their game? What are they? Is it as an experiment? Is it kind of like a social psychology experiment by some species? Like, let's give humans what they're dreaming about, or what they're not fantasizing about, that's the wrong word, what they're creating within their minds, play it back to them and see what happens. What is the end game with it, really?
Maybe it's not even a they. You're familiar with the film Forbidden Planet?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And the MacGuffin, if you will, was the Krell race had developed this technology where you could create the images of thought that you're thinking. You could create, physical manifestations out of your thoughts. But what they forgot about were the monsters from the id. That So what if some of this is, and that's not a very comforting thought, but what if some of this is simply, evoke Carl Jung? What if some of this is simply the collective unconscious? And if if there is a collective mind or whatever, it probably has different strata, and maybe the bottom strata is filled with ambling horrors and beasties that manifest occasionally, which again is not very comforting, but Keel's idea of paranormal mimicry, if that's true, both can be true. I mean, when you look at some of the Bigfoot reports from the Northwest in North America, very flesh and blood, like leave footprints and so forth, and go back to 73, 74 in Pennsylvania. Stan Gordon investigated a series of bizarre Bigfoot reports in conjunction with strange lights in the sky and UFOs. They didn't seem to be solid. It was a case where a woman on her back porch shot one point blank with her shotgun, not knowing what it was. She just called it a big gorilla, and it disappeared in a hail of sparks. I mean, there are a lot of cases. In fact, when I met Zelia at the Van Meter Visitor Festival, was just about another winged creature. We both gave talks there, didn't know each other, but we both talked about a really strange cryptid case out of West Virginia, 1966 or thereabouts. WD, Doc Priestley. Doc Priestley was the guy's nickname anyway. He's going caravan style with his buddies. He's riding behind a bus in a car, a 2-lane along the near Marlington, West Virginia, near the state forest. And all of a sudden, his car stalls and rolls to a stop. He looks up and sees a classic Bigfoot standing on the side of the road to his left. And then his buddies realize he's not behind him anymore. They're turning around to come back for him. Mr. Bigfoot recedes into the woods. He can start his car again. So he gets going a little ways, and all of a sudden his engine starts to chug and spark and eventually burns out. And there is his buddy, either his buddy's back or his kissing cousin, standing next to the road. And there's a few cases, not very many, where the cryptid, in quotes, cryptid, the creature, seems to interact with the engine stalling the car. And again, how do we, if we're thinking about these creatures in a strictly flesh and blood manner, how in heck do we? And also, if you're familiar with Ron Moorhead, a Bigfoot investigator from the U.S., he's the one that captured the Sierra sounds out in the Sierra Nevadas, these great Bigfoot recordings that seem to be legitimate. He would go out there and his batteries would die in his cameras and tape recorders. A lot of the same phenomena that happens in ghostly events and UFO events happen in cryptid events where electronics fail.
Yeah, no, you're right, because a lot of people with alien abductions will say that they're driving along the road and the lights go out and the car won't start, and the electrics come out. They have the experience, they come back, they don't quite know what's gone on, and then the electrics start up and the car starts up. And you're right, the ghostly experience, I've been on ghost hunts myself where batteries drain from cameras and EMF meters and all sorts. It's, what the hell is going on? What the hell is going on?
I remember reading a Seth book some years ago. Seth was this entity that Jane Roberts used to channel. She was a writer and poet.
Seth Roberts. Right.
Yeah, Jane Roberts was the author. Seth was the entity.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, he would come through with various philosophy and whatnot and talk about realities and how we create our own reality and our thoughts manifest as forms and things. So that might explain some of this stuff. But he said that the occupants of UFOs are people or visitors generally from other dimensions. And he said that they are trying to conform to their set rules of their reality, whilst when they intrude into our reality, they're trying to manifest according to the rules of our reality, of our physics, if you like. And so when you see them changing from one shape to another, they're trying to obey two sets of rules at the same time. So one shape is their reality, another shape is our reality. So that might explain why we're getting some weird stuff like phantom airships or craft that appear to be, spluttering and popping with gas and fire and all sorts of things, because it might reflect the reality of the time, the mechanics of the time. But in fact, from where it's come from, it's a very different craft altogether. But it's straddling two sets of kind of rules of the game as such, you see. And so it could be that these creatures, the hominids, the aliens, whatever it is, the men in black, when they intrude into our reality for whatever reason, again, breaking the rules of their reality and trying to mimic our reality. So they do a poor version of it. They try and look humanoid, but they don't quite cut the mustard, as it were. And they don't understand our social etiquette and they ask some weird stuff and weird questions. It's just my theory tying in with the Seth.
You might remember the Kinsellas talking about seeing things like a small gnome creature, Neil. Do you remember that?
Absolutely. I've been talking about that recently to them, yes.
And indeed the Cheshire cat that's kind of like projected onto the ceiling. I don't know if you've heard Simon Parkes talking about when he saw, I think it was a clown or something, or zoo animals kind of projected. It's all kind of like taking things from what we would perceive as being either normal, although a giraffe in your bedroom is not normal, but in their kind of alien consciousness, taking earthly things and playing them back to us and trying to make out that it's normal. It's such a strange area.
It's a bit of a visual Scrabble. It's perhaps a way of communicating with us. And in the way that we might play Scrabble, and we might pick out a load of letters from our bag and try and make a word to communicate with someone, saying go to or something like that. They're taking our symbols of communication, i.e. animals, creatures, people, or whatever, and throwing them back to us in the hope that we might respond in some way. It's almost like I don't know, like in the same way that someone might say go to another country and they're trying to learn the language and they speak in a very broken Spanish or something like that, and they're trying to understand the social etiquette, the language, and things like that. And it's obviously to the Spanish or whichever country you're in that you're a foreigner because you don't know your way about. You're doing some really odd things. You're not taking a siesta when everybody else is. That kind of stuff. You stand out like a sore thumb, and it's these whatevers that are coming into our reality. Again, are not socialized to our way of thinking. And so therefore they appear to be very odd simply because they're and they stand out like a sore thumb to us, I guess.
Steve?
Yeah, it was just when you're talking about channeling, that gets very interesting because some of the, George Hunt Williamson, one of the alleged witnesses to the original George Adamski sighting with, Orthon, the Venusian in the desert, California desert. In later years, they were supposed to have been using radio telegraphy to talk to the entities, but you find out if you check it out, it was more likely they were using things like automatic writing, channeling, and Ouija boards, that kind of thing. Very scientific. But the thing is that when you mentioned about how the possibility that these entities can't manifest in a particular way. There's certain rules. If you look at are you familiar with the Law of One books by Carla Ruckert and Don Elkins? They channeled.
No, I've never heard of that one.
Ra, R-A, like the Egyptian Ra.
Oh yeah, that rings a bell now.
For years, they had this Light Lines group, and they channeled all kinds of entities. Well, it's interesting that some of the same entities which show up with them showed up years before with George Hunt Williamson and George Van Tassel, the guy that lived under Giant Rock in California. So there's all these patterns. But the one thing the thing you said triggered was that sometimes they would say, well, can you land here? Can you talk to us? Well, no, because we're a particular density, and we can't lower ourselves to the density where you can actually see us. But if you step outside your house, you'll see our craft above your house. Or if you look off to the west by those mountains, you'll see our lights. And sure enough, they would step outside and they would see something visually. So it's like we can't. There's that. It's like that teaser in the fairy stories or whatever. They can't get quite close enough to manifest, but yes, we're here and you can see us. It's just very interesting when you go through the channeling stuff. I mean, I'm sure some of it is imaginary and fraudulent, but there does seem to be some of it that is actually coming from a particular source.
Yeah, Jane Roberts wrote about 7 books with this Seth entity channeling through her. And she actually started the whole thing using an Ouija board as an experiment with her husband. And they got in contact, they believe, with a guy called Frank Withers, who claimed to have lived in the house long before they ever lived in there. And then after about the 6th session of contacting this Frank Withers, he actually said, you can actually call me by my other name, which is Seth. And he says, Frank Withers was a fragment personality of mine, which I used to contact you with, in a sort of way of making a polite introduction, as it were, with someone that could be more earthly and amiable to them, rather than if he had come through saying, I'm Seth from Dimension 55 or something, it would completely freaked him out. So I think, in a sense, he was using Frank Withers almost as a calling card to introduce himself in a gentle way, and gradually he unfolded his bigger entity to them and his personality, and over the sort of 30 plus years that he was channeling through, he unfolded lots of extra information that completely became the whole Seth phenomenon. Quite astounding stuff to read. I mean, I'm reading stuff now. It's amazing, but pretty heavy going. But he doesn't talk. Sorry,
was he suggesting that he was that they were part of the same consciousness?
Well, what he would say was that Seth would say that he knew Jane Roberts in previous lifetimes, and in fact, in previous lifetimes, that she would be the channel speaking through him. So they almost had a kind of a sparring relationship, over the centuries, as it were. Except in the 20th century, Jane Roberts was the earthly person that would deliver the message, and Seth was the one that would project it. But he said that he had been many, many different personalities in history, including a minor pope that was, because it's so far back in history that you wouldn't even track down which one it was, because they weren't very good at keeping records around that time, he said. But he had lots of different personalities or previous lifetimes, should I sort of make that more correct, as women and as men. And he knew them, I believe, as traders in Denmark in the Middle Ages or something as well. So for anyone interested in that kind of stuff, it's really worth looking into the Jane Roberts and the Seth material.
Interesting. It's a fascinating area.
It is. Zelia, so have you ever looked into channeling at all, Zelia?
Just a little bit. I mean, I hadn't really been aware of it until reading through Keel. And, it's amazing because so often, too, the way that people contact these vastly different entities, you might think that contacting the spirit of a deceased person versus contacting, an occupant of a UFO would be completely different concepts. But so often they kind of overlap. I know that the origin of the ghost box actually apparently was they were trying to contact space aliens. So again, it's so interesting how there is this kind of, the lines really don't exist. It's not even that they're blurred. It's just that all this stuff kind of works itself in with everything else.
And also Keel was actually dealing a lot with that. He had a group of people he called the silent contactees, because these people firmly believed and were in contact with something, but they weren't out there trying to write books or get attention. They were given quests to go on sometimes. Sometimes they were given, like the Mothman prophecies. They would be given certain prophecies that would come true. But when you got to a certain point, it's like they become abandoned. But if you remember in the film, Keel is talking to Indrid Cold on the phone, right? Well, they put all kinds of things together in the film. But what he believed was that some of these people that were in contact with different entities, APOL was one of them. The person would call on the phone and then say, so-and-so is right here. But actually, they would be channeling this entity. I mean, their voice would change, as it does sometimes during channeling. So Keel was dealing really with a lot of channeling. And one time, he even took this lady, Jay, he called her in the book, out to a place called Mount Misery in upstate New York, where there was a lot of activity. And he put her under hypnosis to try and get some information. And all of a sudden, this other, in quotes, entity took over. And and change the conversation. It was just really bizarre. So, and then there's a pattern that shows up there too, where I won't go into all of it, but there's a pattern that's not everywhere, but it's similar to the where you have this contact, and it's sort of a friendly and then becomes more intimate. But then at the very end, you get the prophecy because you've had so many that were accurate, where the UFOs are going to land on the hill, and get all your buddies together and get the newspapers alerted, and then they don't show up. That happens in automatic writing too, where it appears like you're talking to some other entity, but it goes through those stages. And even if you remember, what's her name? Magic and Mystery in Tibet. The lady that wrote that and talked about the tulpa, 1910 or 11. She was supposedly
Blavatsky, was it?
No, not Blavatsky. No? It was I just lost her name. Anyway, she was an adventurer, and she supposedly learned how to create a tulpa, but from the Tibetans. So she created in her mind this jolly little lama, this cute little guy in the robes and the bald head, and only she could see him, if this is true. And over a period of time, he would become kind of mischievous and would play little pranks. But then it became a little more serious, more like a poltergeist. And when she would see this thing, he became leaner and look actually evil. And allegedly, she had to. It's Alexandria David Neal is the name. She had to kill this thing with her mind. Well, again, we don't know if this is true or not, but I have noticed this pattern does show up, and did show up in the Mothman prophecies with the way these contactees, silent contactees, seem to interact with these entities. And I'm not really sure how actually real the entities were.
Now, Seth would say, I'm guessing this, but based upon the sort of stuff that I recall him saying, that for instance, if someone's being visited by a thought form or an entity, it's actually an aspect of the person that's witnessing it. So it could be that they've, on a subconscious level, partly created it, with maybe another entity, or they've completely created it. And it could be that they want some kind of drama in their life or something, because their life is a bit boring and stagnant. And so they subconsciously create a bit of a conflict going on, but they have a safe area of conflict. Some people create conflict in illness. Other people create conflict and dramas in accidents, or being fired from work or whatever like that. Everyone has their own psychic area of activity, and certain people will, according to Seth at least, have their psychic activity focused within creating like entities possessing them, or aliens coming to grab them, or shadow men doing something to them. And it's just a way, according to him anyway, that these people will manifest these things completely oblivious that they are the creators, like I say, the monster from the id kind of thing. I can't say that's conclusive for all these sightings, but pretty sure that's the kind of explanation Seth would give, at least in some of the books that he's written.
There does seem to be a real. We may be experiencing some kind of a duality. I mean, there are some experiences and entities and sightings that seem to be just physical entities wherever they're coming from, and don't really necessarily respond to the ideas of Keel. But and Keel would say, even he opened the door a little bit to the possibility of ET later on.
Yeah, I think that, obviously there is, really room for multiple options here. And especially, like, I know for me, my interest in the paranormal really started with cryptozoology. That was my big deal for the longest time. And so even to this day, Bigfoot, I kind of have like almost nostalgia with that. I really want it to be some sort of undiscovered primate. But then you get these really weird cases where it just doesn't conform to, the physical material reality. And, you can't disregard that evidence. And so, especially with that, I'm almost of the opinion that some of this stuff is, maybe a case of paranormal mimicry, or maybe, there is definitely room for more than one option with all of these different things.
It's interesting you brought up tulpas, because I think that is the kind of the word we were looking for in terms of like these manifested paranormal entities that are created by our own minds. Because I think wasn't there a case where a tulpa was created with a group and a Ouija board, and basically the premise was this being that they were speaking to was completely made up. It was completely fictional. They made up the name, made up
Brother
who it
Philip
was.
or something like that.
Yeah, Philip the Ghost. Yeah.
Yeah, Philip out of Toronto, right?
Yeah, so you guys were aware of it, yeah, and it manifested itself into reality, and they started having conversations with it. So, are we kind of saying that this group of people creating this Philip were actually talking to aspects of themselves, or are we saying that an entity jumped in and assumed the role of Philip and decided to have some fun with it?
I think. Go ahead, Zelia.
That's like always the question, in my opinion. Now, kind of where does almost our consciousness or subconsciousness end with this, and where does any true outside force begin? And I don't know. I do feel like many of these cases are kind of a blend with different amounts sort of mixed in.
It seems like in some cases that the entities are us. These discussions, these manifestations are us. But in other cases, and the other thing about channeling, are you familiar with the book Oaspi? It was channeled by John Ballow Newborough in the 1800s sometime on a typewriter.
No.
He was supposed to. It's just this giant book, and I try to read it, and I think, oh my God, this is if I die and go to hell, they're going to make me read this thing from cover to cover. But it's just, for me, it's just, I may have offended people that think it's wonderful, but I think it could be just gibberish from the unconscious. But there's other like the Course in Miracles is supposed to have been a book that was channeled by a lady. She believed she was getting these messages directly from Jesus. If you read the book, it's very similar. The philosophy is very similar to what they call the New Thought movement around the turn of the last century, from about the 1860s to the early 1900s. There were several religions that popped up around the same time as Theosophy and the Fox Sisters and spiritualism. But there was religious science, Christian Science, the Unity School of Christianity, very, very similar teachings. But this Course in Miracles, if it did come from somewhere else, it seems to me, my opinion, came from a higher vibration. Some of the other stuff doesn't, I don't know that it, you read some of it and it just seems, I don't know, just sort of pie in the sky, everything's wonderful, and there just doesn't seem to be much substance to it. Yes. Okay. That's a word that I should be using.
What do you think of the material that Edgar Casey brought in maybe 40 years later in the 1930s and 40s with his healing and stuff like that?
That's he seemed to be a lot of it. Of course, he talked about ancient history and so forth, and it seems like I'm not an expert on Casey, but he obviously came through with many cures. I mean, a lot of his stuff was valid. So. Man, I wish I could tap into. I've got a library here that I wish I could go to sleep and absorb it somehow, because I'm not going to live. If I had another 3 lifetimes, I'm not going to get to all these books. But I think. But Zelia, isn't there some strange things about? Oh, wait a minute. He was when he was a young boy, he had some kind of a vision, or this woman appeared before him and asked him, "What do you want to do with your life?" And he said, "I want to help people." And it was years later that he developed this ability to, go to sleep and collect this kind of information. But there's something else, Zelia, about his connection with the Kelly Hopkinsville Goblins, that area of Kentucky.
Yeah. Actually, the place where he was born, I believe, is right near the site of, the Kelly Hopkinsville encounter, which, of course, I mean, that's something that is right on the line between, they wanted to call it either the Kelly Little Silver Men, which is very, UFO sounding, or the Hopkinsville Hobgoblins. So, and that encounter is, it's something that is very kind of right on that line there between older folklore and the current UFO lore. And that was right near his birthplace.
Was it anything directly? I mean, you mentioned a kind of connection. Is it just simply the locale that they both in the same area, or was there some sort of spiritual or ET connection to Casey to these hobgoblins of that particular case?
I think it had more to do just with that, the locale. but still kind of just, whenever you see these like weird little connections, it seems like that happens quite a bit with the paranormal, whether it's similar names or, places where a certain specific thing happened and then it's replicated years later, like the multiple bridge collapse in the area of Point Pleasant. There's just these weird little coincidences that, in my mind at least, add up to synchronicity.
Yeah, I mean, these hobgoblins.
What was that, Andy?
How did they describe the hobgoblins?
They were about 3 or 4 feet high, weren't they? With big pointy ears, and jumping on the roofs.
They floated as opposed to walking. It's just this fantastic encounter. Apparently, one member of the household had seen a UFO that was giving off rainbow-colored flames, and I believe it crashed in a nearby quarry or gulch or something like that. And then later, when he went home for the day, the household was just absolutely besieged by these strange, glowing silver things with, big eyes and kind of pointed ears. And, it's this fantastic encounter. They kept on kind of rushing the household in waves to the point that the family actually shot at them. And their response to getting shot point blank was to just drift to the ground and kind of roll over a few times and then run off into the bushes. So, and that continued for most of the night. The family eventually got the police. And of course, then the creatures were nowhere to be found. So they figured, well, maybe they went away, went back home, turned in for the night, and then they came back. So really just a bizarre encounter.
And a few years ago, they did a documentary, and they found one of the witnesses that was a boy at the time, and he described what happened. And he said that after that event, he went to church every Sunday for the rest of his life.
Interesting. Now, I know that Edgar Casey before, you said that he saw this woman appear and she said, what do you want to do with your life? But my understanding was in this life story that I'd read of him that he was involved in some sort of accident with baseball, where he was either hit with a baseball bat or a baseball ball on the back of the head, and it concussed him, and he was knocked out and in a coma for about 5 or 6 days. And they actually thought he was going to die. I think he was about 15 or 16 at the time. And they said that by about the 5th or 6th day, this voice came from him. He started to channel this voice, which gave clear instructions on how to bring him out of this coma. And so they followed the instructions, and sure enough, Edgar Casey woke up. But he woke up a changed man. And that's the story of how he became who he was, known as a sleeping prophet.
Yeah, it's a story that I need to get into more. Here's another little side thing about the Goblins. I don't know if you're familiar with Jenny Randall's wrote a book called Abduction, and it had to do with the Sutherland family in northeast Wales, about 78 to 80. A lot of bizarre experiences. The kids were seeing some kind of a humanoid-like alien, very angular and so forth. There were communications, very detailed case. But finally, the younger boy, whose name I don't recall, in a couple of years after all this has been going on, they got the idea to put him under regressive hypnosis to see if he had experienced anything. And the aliens that he drew, which had nothing to do with anything that was going on in Wales at this time, looked exactly like the Kelly Hopkinsville Goblins.
Wow. Oh, amazing. Amazing. Did they say they saw any UFOs?
What's that?
Did they see any UFOs in the facility?
Yes, I saw. They were out. Gaynor was out on her bicycle, saw a landed craft, saw these entities walking around them. But then there was another time when they'd already made this contact, and she was asleep, and she had this out-of-body experience when she went and saw them again and actually had a conversation and found out their names. And her mother went upstairs at this time this was happening and saw her lying in kind of a trance, very rigid on the bed, which brings to mind one of the famous contactees, Orfeo Angelucci, who had very classic, Venusian-like space brother contacts, supposedly. He would have his contacts falling asleep on the couch. If you go back to the 1600s, Anne Jeffreys, who had all kinds of encounters with the elementals, with the little people, she didn't leave her room. She would go into a trance in her bedroom and have these very detailed experiences, supposedly, with the little people. So again, another pattern that shows up. Sometimes people are having these very similar experiences, but not going anywhere.
Kind of makes you wonder if all these kind of medieval folklores about goblins and fairies and stuff that we in our supposed rational age of technology and everything, were they actually seeing these things? You know, we kind of assume that maybe it's their overactive imaginations, or maybe, you know, they just misinterpreted interesting creatures that were around, but they kind of put their own spin on it. But maybe these things do exist. You know, maybe these hobgoblins, you know, are from a certain realm. People have seen them. It's the most bizarre thing, but you know,
who was the gentleman? I think, did Neil talk about the gentleman that was going out getting real-time experiences with the fairies and so forth? Well, It was Jacques Vallée used the Fairy Faith in Celtic Countries by Evans Wentz as a reference about 1911. He was in Ireland, and he was talking to people one-on-one, just like we do, talk to people, UFO witnesses or cryptid witnesses, about their encounters with the little people. They weren't stories that were handed down from generation. They were, last year I had an encounter with, you know, a fairy came to my house, or I saw them in a fairy circle or fairy ring or whatever.
Yeah,
they're still going on.
Yeah, it's just interesting, too, how, you know, these symbols and archetypes, they just kind of seem to, a lot of them kind of follow the same path. I mean, right down to flatbreads of fairy folklore and Simonton's pancake. You know, there are these little details that just come up every now and again that seems to really follow a certain, you know, symbolism or something like that. So.
Well, I think we're drawn to a close, everybody, but it's been a fascinating 2 hours chatting to Zelia and Steve, also our co-presenters on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. Now, before we go, Steve, can you tell us a little bit about your show, so that if anyone's interested in tuning into your show, how can they find it, and the title again, and when it's going to be on?
Well, of course, the same network, Paranormal UK Radio Network. It's called The High Strangeness Factor, every fortnight. And, of course, most of us Yanks don't know what the hell a fortnight is, so that's why I say it all the time. And it's just usually about an hour and a half long. And Zelia is one of my, fortunately, one of my regular co-hosts, and we always have a good time. I have a series of great co-hosts. Andy Mercer, who has been involved with the station as well, is the co-creator of the show, and he's my producer. So I have to take very good care of Andy, or you'll never hear it. So every other week, and it's just a lot of fun. We cover everything. So tune in.
Excellent. And Zelia, your show is at the and not another tinfoil hat. Is that right?
Just Another Tinfoil Hat.
Another Tinfoil Hat. Yeah.
Yep, and that's also the name of my YouTube channel and my website. But the podcast on the Paranormal UK Radio Network is new episodes every other Monday. And I try to have, you know, a vast variety of guests because I am interested in, again, every aspect of the paranormal. So talk to some really interesting people. And Steve has been a co-host once so far, but he's also guested a few times. So yeah,
we're stuck with each other. You know, if we ever need a guest, we're all set.
Excellent. A great backup plan there.
Yes.
Great. Okay. And do you have any website, any books coming out, anything like that people might want to know about?
Yes. The Parallels and Patterns, a new paradigm for the study of paranormal phenomena by Joey Medea and myself. It'll be a while yet. We're going along very well. Joey, fortunately, is a real writer and author, and he's taken me under his wing. So it's working out very well. You can also hear me weekly on Mac Maloney's Military X-Files as a lowly, humble correspondent.
Talking about your breakfast cereals.
Yes, that's right.
And Zelia, have you got any books in the pipeline, or any appearances at conferences maybe?
Boy, well, hopefully I'm going to be getting into the book writing business soon. That's kind of been kind of a dream of mine, seriously, since I was a kid. I've been interested in this stuff forever. So hopefully soon. And then I think my next live speaking engagement is probably going to be the Van Meter Visitor Festival, which is in September 26th, I think. I'm really looking forward to that. And Steve's going to be there as well.
Yes, we'll both be speaking there. That's in Van Meter, Iowa, is just west of Des Moines.
Okay, great.
Nobody knows where Des Moines is, but that's okay.
So COVID-19 permitting, you'll both be there. Hopefully a lockdown will be severe, reduced or completely over by then. Fingers crossed.
Well, fortunately, the state of Iowa isn't quite as restrictive, and it's not as crowded of an event. So I would hope that it will go on.
Excellent. Well, good luck with that. And good luck with your shows coming up. And give our regards to colleagues on the other shows that you're taking part in, because I always listen to them anyway. Mac Maloney and guys on that. I always listen to that one. Enjoy that very much. So, Andy, any last words?
Yeah, it's just that it's been a really good show, and it's raised more questions than it's actually answered. But I think that's the case with most of our shows, really. But yeah,
it certainly whets our psychic appetites for more, and hopefully it does to our listeners. And thanks very much for our listeners who tune into us once a month, and we're certainly getting some good feedback there for people that are listening to our show. So please do keep listening to the Paranormal UK Radio Network, and of course the Paranormal Peep Show with Andy Chaplin and myself, Neil Geddes-Ward. Stay tuned, and we'll see you next month. Good night now.
See you later.